Talk to Zia Yusuf, Chairman of Reform UK. I don't know if you were listening to John Rentoul there, Zia, but it's a pretty good explanation of what's gone wrong with politics in this country when the guy from The Independent says, 1, more people should live in cities, 2, most British people don't like Donald Trump, and 3, everybody thinks the NHS is going really, really well.
Good morning, Mike. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Those comments don't reflect the way hard-working British people think. When we look at something like Labour support, as you just mentioned, only 1 in 5 people eligible to vote in the UK actually came out and voted for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn achieved in both of the elections in which he stood. So they've governed as if they have this walloping mandate based on the fact that our voting system, the first-past-the-post system, gave them this majority in quite an esoteric way. And that is coming back now to haunt them. If we look at the NHS, try getting a GP appointment. We talk to people all over the country who struggle to get one. Try getting a dentist appointment. The fact that 19,000 people in the United Kingdom last year had to wait in excess of 3 hours for accident and emergency care, that's a catastrophe. And these numbers are all getting worse, not better. Every possible outcome, measurable outcome you would look at the NHS is as close to as bad as it has ever been.
Yeah.
And so we need a totally different way of thinking about politics in this country. And that's why reform has all of this momentum. The stranglehold that the 2 old parties have had in this country on British politics, the same 2 old parties that don't really give you any meaningful alternative anymore, that's now being broken. People can see that Nigel Farage as our Prime Minister, really, for the first time in decades, we would have a Prime Minister who would put the interests of the British people first, ahead of those of foreign citizens, ensure that any time we hear about tough decisions, Mike, I mean, how many times do you hear about tough decisions needing to be made? Yeah. And invariably, those decisions come at the cost of hard-working British people. We know it's never the foreign aid budget, for example, that's going to be cut. We took the Labour government viciously took away the winter fuel allowance from almost 10 million pensioners to supposedly save about 1.5 billion. And then within a couple of months announced a further £2 billion to, quote, fight climate change in foreign countries. So this is the sort of catastrophic self-harm that successive British governments, including and especially 14 years of Tory rule, have inflicted on the British people. They want something different, and that's what a Prime Minister, Nigel Farage, will deliver. Yeah,
and I think people are seeing it more and more and more. Let's have a quick look at what Nigel Farage had to say yesterday at the farmers' demonstration in Westminster.
I have been coming to farming and rural demonstrations in London since the 1990s. The whole assault on the countryside, a parliament that's now got almost no connection with agriculture, with fishing, with food, with where it comes from. And basically what we're really witnessing here is giant global corporates against the little man and woman. That's really at the heart of all of this. And I'm a huge amount of sympathy.
And we've got, of course, in Angela Rayner talking about sort of, basically concreting over the home counties, because the Labour Party hates ordinary people in Britain. They hate the idea that you might live in a nice house and have a nice garden and you might have a nice car, but you work very hard for it. The sense is that they kind of are taking their revenge on all the people in Britain they don't like.
I couldn't agree more, and that might sound hyperbolic, but it really isn't. Unfortunately, it is the sad truth. This Labour Party, the cabinet of the Labour Party, seem to think that by creating wealth for oneself, you have taken that wealth away from other people. That is not the case at all, other than in a very small number of circumstances. In the vast majority of cases, by creating wealth for your business or for your family, you're creating wealth for everybody else, for your community, for society as a whole. You're paying taxes. Farmers especially, I think there's an ideological element to this too, Mike. I think that farmers are one of the few areas of our society today where there is a durable connection with our ancestors. The idea that one must live actually quite symbiotically with the land, with the creatures that live on it, and with the vegetation that's on it. And if you disrupt that imbalance too much, then your yield will not be where you need it to be. So everything has to be really optimal. None of that connection that farmers and their families have with that land and with those creatures, and the responsibility they have to their families, to their communities, these are all antithetical to what this Labour government believe in. And so I think that this is extremely vicious. We need our farmers. We rely on them for our food. We need far more food to be grown in this country. Food security over the next few decades, Mike, is going to be of absolutely critical importance. The US cares deeply about it. China cares deeply about it. India cares deeply about it. It is yet another act of vicious self-harm on the British people via these appalling acts on the farmers that this Labour government is becoming famous for.
And of course, we're talking a lot this morning about the terrible story on the front pages of little Sara Sharif and her evil father, who should never have been in this country. He came on a student visa. He then knew that visa was going to run out, got himself a sham marriage to a Polish woman, which allowed him to stay here. He's now been found guilty of the most horrendous, awful crime, along with his other wife, who's the stepmother of little Sarah. Richard Tice was on with Jeremy Kyle yesterday saying, you know, serious questions have to be asked about these human rights lawyers, about whether political correctness was to blame for the fact that the social services never properly investigated this man.
Couldn't agree more. Serious questions need to be asked. And in the end, we know in the current political system in this country, those questions are never asked. There are never serious consequences for any public servant that does anything wrong whatsoever. When was the last time you heard about somebody being fired, somebody being reprimanded for doing something atrocious? You know, this is a tragic case here. You could see, look what happened with the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, upgrading their net migration numbers by 20% in the year leading into a general election. And has anyone been fired? Has anyone been held accountable for the fact that apparently 200,000 people arrived in the country legally that we knew nothing about until months and months after the event? This is, again, catastrophic mismanagement, incompetence of the highest level. It's a betrayal of the British people. And I'm telling you, when Reform are in government and Nigel is our Prime Minister, all of this will change. We will have outstanding people at the head of government. We'll bring in the best talent in the country into key areas of the civil service. We will make sweeping cuts within the civil service. And most importantly, we will bring back accountability to the British people for the people upon whom their salaries depend.
And what will you do about a London secondary school where the pupils are being told that you should have fast for Gaza? This is going to happen tomorrow, apparently. St George Green School in Tower Hamlets have been told, come together in a collective fast in support of the people of Palestine. Now, more than half of the pupils at this school are eligible for free school meals, suggesting that they come from pretty poor backgrounds. I mean, what is the point of that?
Well, I don't think it's a place for a school like that to be imposing such nakedly political views on all of its students. And you're seeing this now writ large within the educational system, unfortunately. There's I think the word indoctrination is one we hear from parents so frequently now that we lose count. When parents are looking for a school for their children, one of the biggest things that they are now looking for is a school that will not actively indoctrinate their children as opposed to actually educate their children. And we seem to have lost sight of that fact in this country. The teachers and schools and the education system are there to educate children, teach them how to think, make open-minded, brilliant people to go out into what is becoming an increasingly competitive world. And we're seeing the opposite of that happen. We're seeing teachers, too many teachers, not all of them, but more than ever, teachers are becoming political activists, and there's no excuse for that whatsoever.
No, indeed. Let's finish up with Nick Candy. It's been a pretty good week for you guys at Reform. You know, Nick Candy joining, former Tory donor, supported Labour a bit in the past as well, but a very wealthy, self-made man, a bit like yourself. It feels like another sort of shift up of a gear, perhaps.
Absolutely. I've been saying for some time that, Nigel is building a really formidable team. Nick is a wonderful addition to the Reform team. He's a self-made billionaire. He's got property developments across the world that are the envy of his competitors. And he's a force of nature. And, we've got now a few of these at Reform. We're going to continue to grow. We're very grateful to have him on board. He's going to raise us money. But look, we have all of the momentum in British politics for a reason. We're the only ones who are actually standing up for the British people and holding this Labour government to account. Reform has 5 MPs and 16 employees. Labour has 402 MPs, hundreds of employees, the whole machinery of the government at its disposal, and we are now polling ahead of them in some of the polls out there. So we're seeing something very special happening. Nick is a phenomenal addition that is going to be a force multiplier for Reform going forward.